Hello. Hi, everybody. My name's Judith Ridge, and I am your host tonight for our Authors Online chat with Charlie Archbold. I'm very delighted to have been... Oh, hi, everybody. Oh, I have to mute my iPad. I'm so sorry. For our Authors Online chat with Charlie Archbold. I'm very delighted. I've got that on so I can keep an eye on questions, and I forgot that it would actually go live and I would hear myself in echo. My apologies. Sorry about that. Let me start again. Yes, so as I was saying twice, it is really a wonderful opportunity to be here and to talk to Charlie, who I've only just met tonight for the first time over the miracle that is Zoom. That has been such a boost and a bane to us all this year. So it's been a lovely half hour we've had just chatting and getting to know each other. So before I begin our conversation tonight, I would like to thank the organisers and Wakefield Press, but also, of course, I'd like to pay tribute and acknowledge that we are all meeting wherever we are in this big country of ours on unceded Indigenous land. Personally, I'm on the land of the Darug people in northwestern Sydney, where I have spent a lot of my working and living years, and it's a beautiful country, and I really thank them for their custodianship, not just of the country but of the stories of country, and that's of course what it's all about for us tonight. And Charlie comes to us from Adelaide, the land of the Kaurna people. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And wherever you are, if you would just in your own mind take a moment to acknowledge this beautiful country that we live on, and the fact that it is unceded land, and our respects to Aboriginal people involved in this talk tonight. So thank you all for that. Okay, so Charlie, hello.
Hello. Hi, Judith.
I thought I would begin. We have done a little bit of a mud map plan for tonight, just to kick things off, well, I was going to provide a summary, but then I thought, well, the good people at Wakefield Press have already done that. So I might just read the blurb from their website because, you know, they're the professionals at this stuff. So I'm sorry?
Oh, I just said the work's been done on the verb. Yeah.
The work's been done, yes. Yeah. Why, is my connection okay? I just got a little... I've got the proper NBN, thank you, Mr. Turnbull. So it should be fine, but I just did get a little notification. Okay, well, I'll just plough ahead.
I will.
Okay, cool. All right. I don't like those little windows that pop up and tell you something's wrong. They're intimidating. Okay, so Indigo Owl, Charlie's second novel, and here's what the book is about. After Earth was destroyed by climate change and overpopulation, private corporations colonised new planets. One such planet, Galbraith, the fertility of its citizens is tightly controlled, but at what cost? When Scarlett Bergen leaves her childhood home to be trained at the Arcadia Institute, harnessing her psychic solitaire talents, it feels like the beginning of her future. But on the Institute steps, her father whispers a life-changing secret about the past. Her mother, a geneticist who disappeared when Scarlett was 10, had enemies. Scarlett vows to discover the truth about her mother and is joined in her mission by fellow cadets with their own family secrets and special talents. Tech-savvy Rumi, a tenacious truth hunter, and Dylan, the aloof classmate who can literally read her mind. Together, they'll uncover a planet-wide conspiracy and discover that there's little the Galbraith executives won't do to get what they want. Indigo Owl is a fast-paced dystopian adventure from author Charlie Archbold, winner of the 2018 Children's Book Council of Australia Honour Book for Older Readers for her debut novel, Mallee Boys. So just to flesh that out a little bit, so we are on planet Galbraith, named for the corporation that has colonised this planet. And there are 3 key cities in Galbraith, and I'm just looking for my notes under my iPad. They are Arcadia, Eden, and Paradise. And each of those cities boasts an institute, which is, I guess, kind of like a residential university style.
Yeah.
Environment.
Training college. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
A training college.
Training college, yes. Yes, and we will come to the nature of the institutes in our conversation tonight. Yeah. Now, there are 4 faculties in each of the institutes. As we've just heard, Indigo is a solitaire, and they are people, they're kind of empaths.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Empathetic, yeah.
And they have what you might broadly call psychic abilities.
Yeah, kind of like a pseudo kind of parapsychology kind of vibe. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there's the Malachites and practical
scientists,
like geologists, and as the name would suggest, like earth workers.
Yeah.
I've got down there the worker bees.
Yeah.
of the society. Then we have Willow. Now, I've kind of got them down as our admin and event management people.
They are, totally. That's them.
Okay. And then the Cardinals.
Yes, not many.
Born to rule.
Born to rule. Born to rule, born to rule. Yeah.
Now, we have also our 3 main characters. The Indigo Owl of the title is Scarlet. Then there's Dylan and Rumi. And each of the 3 narrate alternately throughout the course of the novel. And that's actually where I'd like to start talking to you about your writing process. And we'll come to the genre stuff next. But I want to start off by saying to you that what struck me when I first started reading the book, each chapter is named by the name of the character who's narrating, but I didn't need them, because you have achieved something that I think is quite difficult, and that is it's really clear who is speaking at any given time, because you have found a distinctive voice, a distinctive syntax, vocabulary, way of speaking and worldview that is expressed through the narration of each of your three narrators. I've read a lot of multiple narrative books in my life, and not everybody can do it. So I'm really interested. People who are big bestsellers can't always do it. And I'm thinking the adult world here, not just our little corner of the literati. But so I'm interested in how you went about finding their voices, and also if your background in drama, which perhaps is a while ago now, but nevertheless, I wonder if that brought to bear on your ability to find such a unique voice for each of your characters.
Look, I think that's exactly right. I think when I was younger, I studied a lot of plays. I did drama at university. And I think that when I'm writing now, I really tend just to think of the characters in like a longer narrative, almost like characters in a play. Mm. And then once you kind of get them in your head, it's actually I find it quite easy to switch into that type of character. Mm-hmm. And I think because in plays, so much of the story is driven through narrative. I think that, not narrative, through dialogue.
Yeah.
The characters in the book, I kind of can hear how they speak, or I can really get their dialogue and their kind of verbal interaction, which I think helps to define them rather than just like describing what they look like or what they do. Mm-hmm. So, I think as well, when you're in plays or like when you study drama, you really get used to like that kind of scenic kind of feel.
Yes.
And so I think for me, when I'm writing now, I quite like that feel. Like it's almost like, curtains closed on that character, and then I open it up, and then there's another scene with another one, and that curtains open, through the thing.
What an interesting observation.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today, but that's kind of how I see it. It's like
I can absolutely
little baby scenes rather than scenes kind of fit. And I think the other thing that you find in plays is that the play is often sort of, the story of the play is often held by multiple characters at different times. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, when I'm writing now, because I like those different voices, it's almost like that, like one character will have information that another character doesn't. Yeah. And then you just kind of have to kind of then weave it all back together again. But I quite like that. I like that way of writing. And
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
that.
that's fascinating, because I can see now how that's absolutely informed the structure of your novels. So that's really interesting. Do you talk to them in your head? Do you make notes? Do you do character profiles?
I do find that one of them will get a bit stronger, so I really hear that voice a bit stronger, and then then through the drafts I've realized, oh my gosh, this one's really taken off, so then I kind of have to try and put it back again sorry to make sure that they're more balanced. So I just get a quick bit.
Let me guess, that was Rumi?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Oh, she's getting out of control. To pull her back.
Now, I hope your voice is going to hold out, because we had thought that it might be a good time for you to read some sections of each of those three characters.
Yeah, that would be great. I just had like a bit of that hay fever. I think there's lots going around with spring and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought I might just introduce just a little bit of the characters if you wanted, just to read a little bit, so we can get the sort of vibe of them a little bit. So the book starts when Scarlett arrives at the Institute, and she's lived a very sort of quiet, quite sheltered, protected life. And this is kind of the moment really when she realizes that what she thought was her reality is probably going to be a little bit different. So her dad's just dropped her off and is about to drop a bombshell. Papa does something he's never done before. He steps close and he pulls me into a hug. His grip is tight. He holds me. He pushes back my hood and he whispers in my ear, Vivian had enemies. What? I whisper back. Mama hardly ever left the facility. All she did was her work. Her work was controversial. People may be watching you. He steps back, pushing me away, pulling up my hood. There's nothing more for you to know now, little owl. It's a childhood nickname, one he hasn't used for years. What do you mean? You can't leave me like this. No more questions, Scarlett. No hunting for ghosts. You need to be stronger. How dare he? How many times as a little girl had I tried to talk about Mama and why she left? As each year passed, I'd hoped to hear from her, hoped she was alive, hoped she remembered me. It was a thought I'd been forgotten that hurt the most. And then he tells me something like this now. So she starts off her journey at school, realizing that it's a lot more complicated than what she thinks it's going to be.
Yes, and right from the start, we get her vulnerability. Because of that great loss and sorrow in her life.
And Rumi is a really different character. Like, she kind of beats to her own kind of agenda. So she will just do whatever she wants to do, regardless of the consequences, which I quite really like writing her, because she was such a sort of a free, strong sort of character. And this is a part when we kind of get the bit of a gist of her. There's a sort of a baptism gala where all the cadets have to go to like this formal party. I hate parties. This is no exception, but I have to go. We're meant to dress formally in the colour of our faculty, but trust me, no one looks good in purple. I look like a modified plum. It's a rare event for anyone to be out of uniform, so most cadets have gone all out tonight. Their regulation grey cast aside. We're all colour, hair and shimmer and shine. The sanctorum has been transformed. The ceiling is peeled back and an umbrella of glass protects us from the night. Helpbots mingle with trays of food and drink, and the music of the Eden choirs soars around us. It's pretentious and hideous. Flawless Savannah sweeps in, draped in a tight sheath, her perfume like a punch. She pauses and looks me up and down. Oh dear, Rumi, didn't anyone tell you this was a formal event? How charming of you to come dressed as a ripe berry. I will be putting in a written complaint, Savannah. Lavender is not purple. The rules clearly state cardinal cadets must wear purple. Oh, seriously, Rumi, you have to be the most annoying person ever. Like I care what you think. Well, you should. It's still a mystery to me why you're even being considered as a cardinal. You're not one of us. Why don't you run along to your lab? You're not really the baptism gala type. And with a flick of her hand, Savannah swans away and walks towards the others. They wear tunics shimmering with silver flecks like would-be monarchy. How ironic, humanity clinging to the hierarchies and symbols that landed Earth in such a mess. hierarchies that have no regard for my Marjorie's life. I swallow my fury and let Savannah wriggle away. She'll keep.
And there she is. There's our roomie. Maybe just a brief explanation who Marjorie is.
So Marjorie is Rumi's sister, and she died because of an illicit drug trial that was carried out by the Galbraith executives. And her search for justice is really what drives the narrative and sweeps Scarlett along in the conspiracy that leads to the sort of climax of the novel. Yeah.
Great. Hey, and that then brings us to Dylan.
Oh, I know. I'm very fond of Dylan. So Dylan is, he's the other central character. And Dylan, so maybe this just sort of gives a little bit of an idea about Dylan. He has synesthesia, and he struggles with that, but also expectations and probably feeling isolated from like his own family. When I was a kid, I thought everyone saw the world my way. I didn't notice how Eli would avoid me. I remember one summer day when reality hit me like an ice pick. I was at home in our house overlooking the magnificent Santora Bay on the outskirts of Eden. Great glaciers like mountains pierced the horizon between the bright green water of the bay and the brilliant blue of the sky. My father and I were sitting together on the pristine sofa. Around us, the room was filled with ethereal music from a place and a time far away. Lilting flurries of notes tinkled like glass chimes, rising and falling and pulling you into their melody. I watched them sprinkle like violet snow. I was so excited. I called out to him, "The music! Listen, Dad, it looks so beautiful. Do you see it?" He turned on me, his face disgusted. "What do you mean, see? It's music. You hear it, Dylan, not see it." There was such bitterness in his voice, shame. He turned away and called at my mother as though I wasn't there. "I can't deal with him. I told you I only wanted a cardinal child, and you give me him. All that sensitivity only made Silas weak." My synesthesia is an unwanted inheritance, and my father has never been able to move past the fact that his son is a sensory freak like the twin he despised. My brain interprets my senses in unexplained ways. I hear sound, but I don't just hear it like most people. I see it too. Or I'll touch something and it feels totally different to what everyone else experiences. Music is colour, written words and noises teasing my mind. You get the drift. After that day, I stopped using the word Dad and started calling my father Eli. We're both more comfortable with the distance. So, yeah, he's coming to terms with his own thing.
Fantastic. No, and such great selections too, because you've introduced those characters beautifully to our audience tonight. So we will come back to them, but I do want to ask you about the choice to move from a classic Australian realist novel mode to the dystopian genre. It's a big, and some would say brave leap. Particularly you have success with a particular kind of book, and people have expectations, and then you give them something they weren't looking. Well, So I just just check my questions. Yeah, just what led you to that? It's been a popular genre for a good 10 years or more now.
Yes.
It comes and goes, as we know, but seems to be pretty well entrenched at the moment for reasons that may or may not be obvious. And so given that, not only why you decided that this was the story that you needed to tell right now, but also, were you concerned about, the field and entering into that field with something original to say and in a different way than's been said?
Look, I think so. I think at the time when I started writing, I'd always really liked, watching and reading fiction narratives in that space. So it's kind of like I really like those sorts of texts and films and stuff like that. So, and when I finished Mally Boys, I didn't really kind of know, what its journey would be. Like, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed like we talked about before, the writing style of the different characters. So at the time when I started Indigo Owl, it was really just an idea I was really interested in at the time, and I just kind of started it. And then it was only afterwards I thought, oh gosh, that's such a massive departure from the other one. and I've had people say, look, I really like the other book, but I'm not sure if I like this one. And I'm like, oh, it's totally, it's fine. I think maybe sometimes, maybe when you kind of into something like writing or whatever, sometimes you just kind of have to follow your own curiosity or your own passion, if you know what I mean, not necessarily thinking about how it might end up. You want it to be where you want to do the best job that you can, but you kind of you just kind of go off on a different sort of pathways. So I think that has been a question,
and of course it's still recognizably you. You've got the narrative.
So, yeah, that's great. That's great.
and so on. So and those strong voices. So, but just interested in that. So it wears its influences very lightly, but they are there. There's the control of fertility, which of course puts us in mind of Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen the recent trailer that was released for the new Brave New World series.
No, I haven't, but that probably is very in there as well.
There's some echoes of Brave New World. I was interested that you chose the same. You chose the passage where Rumi says something that I'm going to quote later as well about the hierarchies.
Yeah.
So of course, and then we're in the whole YA genre, so we've got the heavy shadow of Hunger Games.
Yes, of course,
and of course there are elements of that, but in this instance, the young people are sort of pitted against each other, both socially and, in a sense, intellectually, rather than in physical combat.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wondered if you'd talk a little bit about your influences in terms of the genre.
Well, look, I really like, I think the dystopian genre, and the thing about like speculative fiction is that it is a way to look at issues or to look at things that's slightly removed from our world. So it's kind of not safer, but it's a different place to explore things and themes and characters. And I like the way that it takes an idea and then takes it to an extreme. So I think that some of the books that have just blown me away. They're not necessarily YA books, but there's a book called Never Let Me Go, The Girl with All the Gifts. Those sorts of books where there is that sense that there's government control, there may be technological control, there's survival, but at the core, there's that loss of individualism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I really like in all those dystopian books and movies and other narratives kind of have that at their core. And what's the point? What's your tipping point that you are going to make a change?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, which brings me to the social structure of Galbraith, and there is a suggestion that there are other planets that have similarly been colonized by corporations. And so what we're let me just find my question so I make sure I cover exactly how I wanted to put it. That we have here. Yeah, okay. So I actually found this really compelling and very reflective of the state of the world that we're in now. So we are used to seeing corrupt governments in dystopian fiction, or even monarchies. You can still get that classical kind of
for sure.
system. But
Definitely.
In your vision of the future, it is corporations who are running things.
Yes.
And there are faces to that corporation. But there's no sense of what we would call democracy. There's no sense of civic engagement in this society. People are moved into their four categories, and that's the quote from Rumi where she says about the hierarchies that caused us all this problem in the first place, why we're
Yeah.
here in the first place.
Yeah.
Whereas Dylan, who is meant to be a natural born cardinal,
Yeah.
but is actually a solitaire,
Mm.
he is accepting of those hierarchies. While he has obvious, in the figure of his father and the death of his uncle, at the hands of the corporation, he has his quite deeply ingrained problems with the corporation, and yet he is also less questioning and
Yes.
so on. Yeah.
Well, I think that's maybe what happens in a lot of dystopian narratives. There's this sense that of, maybe like apathy, that everything is the way it is, it's not too bad, everyone's got what they need. But then there's something like a trigger that causes that question. So for Rumi, who kind of really propels that in the characters, it is that deeply embedded sense of injustice, and that it's not okay, and that something needs to change, even if it's just a small kind of tiny seed. And so I think that those hierarchical structures are quite they're quite a feature of dystopian narratives in general, I think.
Let's go back to the corporation for a moment as well, because I think like all dystopians being a comment on our own society, I think it's quite apposite that you've chosen that these are the leaders, the big money, the big end of town corporation, even big pharma, which is the kind of the word I'm looking for a lot of people. Big pharma is this scary kind of entity. Speaking of trailers, I watched a trailer today for the new series based on Asimov's Foundation novels. And I've not read them. I have a colleague who's a science fiction fan who said to me that he wants to read your book, and he said, when I read your description, it sounds to me like Asimov's Foundation. And I said, I don't know Asimov's Foundation. He said, there's going to be
on my list.
So I watched that. Now the interesting thing is this series has been made for Apple TV or by Apple TV, and the trailer starts out as this big, Apple, the technology of the future, making our lives better, this big kind of blurb, and I thought, wow, like even in the context of storytelling and presenting a fiction that is a critique of our society, they're still plugging the company behind it. And I just thought it was so interesting and appropriate, given the corporation, the nature and power of the corporation in your novels. So I wondered if you would talk a little bit about that and why that was the organizing structure you gave to the world.
Well, I think it's just, I suppose, once again, like with this speculative fiction, you take an idea in your head and you kind of follow the tendrils of it. And like when you watch the news or when you're listening to things, there is so much around actually like the powers of companies now, and the wealth of companies and the lack of accountability and the lack of scrutiny. And just even now, like when everyone's talking about just over the last sort of few months, everyone going into space or trying to have ownership of part of the moon. So I think that it just, for me, it was kind of it seemed to me as a natural progression of that sort of that imbalance. And it's a bit like, if everything's a total mess somewhere else, who will have the money, and it will be and they will be big companies will be the ones who will afford to colonize space.
And with that money and access to the incredible technology that they've developed through that, they've superseded the need for like security forces or
you don't need And also as well, you also become very unaccountable to anyone. You can kind of do what you like, really, and that's what That's what happens on Galbraith, that corruption, because there is no accountability to anyone. They've done what they've wanted to do, and they want to do it how they want to do it. And that's that sort of sense of lack of control and accountability. And I think those are issues that are contemporary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then of course there's the gender issues inherent in a novel that deals with the control of fertility, and of course it's women's fertility that's being controlled here. So plus ça change, as they say. I just wondered if you would like to talk a little bit about that too. The what is presented to the society is that fertility has been lost through the environmental degradation and so on, and that their advanced fertility technology allows them to essentially manufacture embryos, and people have to apply in order to become pregnant. However, this is not the whole story, as we would probably, if we thought about it too hard, would figure out fairly soon. But it is revealed, of course, that there are in fact fertile women, and that the corporation knows very well what's going on. So
I think in one of the early drafts I did write, it kind of got cut in the end, but I did sort of address that a bit more fully, saying how how women have to still carry so much burden around those sorts of issues. And I didn't go into that too much in the book, but I think that is something that's still there's still so much inequality in that space.
Yeah, I think it's implicit.
I think I wanted to, say that really, the corporation's gone, they're not going to change something. Why would they? If it's working, why would they bother, type of thing. And it's another form of control. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And it's like, they brought those hierarchies that caused the problem in the first place. Why wouldn't they bring, a big dose of misogyny along with it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was that sort of sense. I didn't because it's kind of a bit more speculative. I didn't want to take it totally away from what we have on Earth, because I'm not really, I hope not, but you worry that maybe some of those things will still follow us to the other planets.
Well, I guess the thing about dystopian is that it reminds us that just as we have good qualities, that we hope the humanity has great qualities, such as, those exemplified by your three narrators. But we also have this kind of, the whole thing about not learning from history and reinscribing. And it's, as Rumi says, we bring the problems with us that caused us,
problems in the first place.
So I don't think it's at all necessary to spell those things out implicitly. I think it's quite clear, explicitly. I think it's quite clear through the stories of the women who have, who are the fertiles and who have, sorry for the spoilers, but you can't avoid it. I think that's quite evident through the storytelling. There's no need to layer that with, explicit statements. In other aspects of your world building, I really love the physicality of the world. So we're on a snow planet, an ice planet, as was beautifully described by Dylan in the passage that you read us earlier. And as an animal lover myself, and also someone who pays attention to the details with my editorial background, I loved your little references to the animal life, the wildlife of the planet. So we have the Galbraith bison wool that the cloaks there's references to snow hyenas and other animals of that nature, plants like the hybrid snow ivy that grows over the Institute. And there's a lovely little moment where I can't remember who it belongs to, but I think it was somebody's mother owned a statue that in our world would be the three wise monkeys, see no evils, no evils. But on Galbraith they are miniature paradise reindeer. And I love all that
creative license there.
But that's the fun part, isn't it?
That is the fun part. That is the fun part.
It also gives us the flavour of the world, and the again, going back to your characters and their language, the metaphor that Dylan uses of the ice pick and so on, they're all very much coherent to the world that you're building. But what I want to know is, are they native? Those animals, are they native to the planet that we've colonised, or are they lab products? Have they been made to replicate a wildlife?
I know, that's such a good question, because I think that's really. It is actually. That's like that was like the other part of world building. Like, I was talking to someone, my brother, and he said, "You've got all these things in it," and I said, "Well, that's the joy of it." I said, "You can BYO your own flora and fauna.
Yeah.
It's your world." But I think so. Some of them are native, and then some of them are introduced and engineered.
Yes.
The bison are native. So
okay.
Yeah. Kind of like a mammoth kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had in mind. Yes, that's
so
and they're so important, of course, for the benefit of our audience, because it is a planet of snow and ice, and the buildings are well regulated, and it is possible to go outside, so there is a breathable atmosphere, but it is not possible to survive outside for lengthy periods without proper protective clothing, and the bison cloaks are really essential, a part of that, and also play some role in the story in other ways as well. And you also, I noticed Dylan had a cat, so I thought of all of the animals that would make it to another planet, it had been a cat.
I think that comes with the idea that they've sort of settled from Earth, so it's a bit like they've brought their own stuff, some of their own stuff.
Of course, as we would, and it's like Red Dwarf and somebody involved into it. Of course. Okay, so now your characters have access to various communication devices, and I'm really interested in the influence of social media on how that works, because they are, of course, young people, and they use these devices professionally in their training to communicate with their families that they've left when they've been brought to the institute. But there are also little hints of the kind of social media usage with them, and I just wondered if that was something that you
because obviously it is in the future, but not too far away. And I suppose it was a bit the idea of like looking at what technology we have here, and then like today, and then kind of tweaking that a little bit, and then sort of maybe even extending it a little bit. Like, we will have robots, so it seemed to me that they would totally be part of their world, but not to the extent that in the early drafts I spent quite a lot of time actually writing out lots of details about the technology,
right,
which is and I think I was kind of explaining it to myself, like what each thing did and its function and how it looked and everything. And then as I went through more and more of the drafts, those descriptions just got less and less, because they almost kind of didn't need to be there, because they became embedded.
Yes.
So
you needed to know how it worked. So
I had to do it how I knew how it worked.
That to us by just having them being used and that part of the world. Yeah. There's a quote I often come back to from an American fantasy writer. Oh, her name has just jumped out of my head, but it's in a collection of essays that's one of my prized possessions. And she says that when she's creating a world, she knows how everything works down to the plumbing. You never see the plumbing, but she knows how the plumbing works. I think it's such a great metaphor, and I've always used it when I've been teaching creative writing. You know the plumbing.
I think that's right, and I think maybe, and it becomes less and less necessary, I think, as you work through the drafts. But just things like the help bots.
Yes.
Just by suddenly the name, for me, well, your reader is more than capable of imagining what a help bot is. They don't need me to kind of break it down.
Yeah.
But when I was writing it the first time, it was like, it's about, knee high and, all this sort of stuff, and has all these attachments and things. But then that became less. And the same with the cat's eye. It just kind of is like a fusion device, which, I went into a lot of detail in my head of explaining it. And then I thought, and then it just doesn't sort of seem to matter so much,
Yeah.
because the reader can piece all that together, hopefully.
Well, you're not spoon feeding the reader. You're
Yeah.
you know it from the inside out, and
Yeah.
and as do the characters. And
Yes,
there's been
yes,
artificiality around. I
yes.
put on my,
Yes, yes, exactly.
So
Yeah, yeah.
and that gives room for the reader too, of course, to enter in and be part of the creation.
Yeah.
And along with all of the dystopian and all of the technology and all of the futurism and all of the, the kind of big ideas there, we have our teenagers.
We do have.
We caught a glimpse of our mean girl Savannah.
Oh yes. She's really.
And we have, what we haven't mentioned is they're a developing attraction between Scarlett and Dylan, happens across the course of the novel. They are put together in the solitaire training, and they have an instant ability to go very deep into each other's minds and emotions. And so there's a very strong connection there, which they both resist for a whole range of reasons, but is a little bit sort of impossible to resist long term. That also brings in our love triangle. Dylan, as the son of privilege, has grown up with children of privilege, and there are an unusual pair of twins. Savannah's boyfriend, Seb and Lexi. Sorry if I got my names wrong.
Oh, there's too many characters.
Not too many characters. And of course, there's so we get a little bit of a love triangle and so on. And so you're dealing, with this layer embedded in it of teenagers being given huge kind of responsibility and expectations on them to fulfill these roles that have been accorded them. They haven't chosen them, and yet they're still teenagers at heart, and there's still all of that dynamic family relationships, relationships with parents. The whole story, of course, with Scarlett's mother has so many levels of tragedy to it, so many layers, and so that's all in there as well. So I guess if you just would like to maybe think about that a little bit.
Look, I suppose what it is, isn't it? I suppose it's like a character. You could have at the end of the day, you want to be invested in the characters, and I think we are, invested in characters if they have elements of, flaw or appeal that that drives us along with them. And I think that for all the technology we have today, we still have a humanity that isn't, that, like you were saying before, can be beautiful or can be awful. And I think that would still be there even in that world, if you know what I mean. It's just so that's coexisting, even though the place where they live is very different and how they live is very different.
Yes, but the nature of teenagers is
universal,
literally.
Exactly. I think so. And also that that very strong sense of right or wrong, or is very important. That of the grey that sometimes teenage protagonists have, that drive them and cause them challenge and success.
Yes, indeed. Now, one thing we share in common, apart from our obvious love of YA and all things associated, is we're both teachers.
Yeah.
And the nature of education in this world was something that really interested me as well. So I talked earlier that we have our institutes that are training institutes with a sort of an aura of, the academy. Well, they're literally called academies, they're called institutes, aren't they?
Yeah, institutes.
Yes, but we have faculties, so we have that echo of the university structure. We have deans.
Yes.
But the nature of the education here is not about intellectual inquiry.
No,
it's not about raising individuals as you alluded to earlier. There's a slight exception there with the solitaires, in that they are given more leeway to pursue their gifts perhaps than the other students are.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, as we find out as the story progresses. That's not the corporation's intent for what happens to those particular cadets. So they are there. I guess it's that utilitarian view of education that we are moving more and more towards in our own world, is that it's to produce workers, it's not to produce
product. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just fit into a role, not too much question, prepare you for that specific, workforce for that specific occupation. Yeah.
And that worry you like it worries me?
Yes, very much. Totally. Yeah. Yes, it does. I mean, it does. I think it's so narrow, so unconducive to creativity, to innovation, to voice. Yeah, I think we have to be really careful. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a question I just asked my Year 9 class. They've just finished their assessment task on our novel study for term 3, which I taught my class Kate Constable's Crow Country, because it's a book I'm very passionate about. And the question that I asked them was, what did they believe? And I know this is probably going to raise some eyebrows because the whole, author is dead. But I asked them to address in their essay question what they felt the author wanted them to take away from their reading of the novel, in terms of the ideas that it was exploring. And I allowed them to choose those ideas. Obviously, if people know Crow Country, there's a lot to do with race and heritage and Australian history, but there's also, they were very interested in the themes of trust and justice that played out in different relationships in the novel. So I'm going to ask you, what would you like your young readers to take away from their reading of Indigo Owl?
Oh, that's such a good question. Let me think. I think I would like them to take away the importance of questioning what you are given, and that can be to become more critical of what you see or read or hear, because I think that's a space where the characters in the book, like most of the population, don't question anything. And if we stop questioning things, then you can end up in a very bad place. And if you just have an apathy, then I think that you won't facilitate or get good change or things for the better. And I think maybe hopefully when the students read the book, that they come away with the sense, like you have with a dystopian novel, that it's important to challenge and to question what you were given. And that may be the questions like we talked about around the fertility, is it a woman's responsibility always, those sorts of questions, those questions around privilege, shouldn't, if you have this privilege, what are you going to do with it? So maybe those would be things to take.
And what just occurred to me as you were speaking is that this is generational as well, because Dylan and Scarlett and Rumi's parents' generation, we don't know how long they've been on Galbraith, but we know there's an old part of town. And so it's been some time, at least 2 generations, perhaps more. And so the older generations are compliant because they're grateful to have survived. They're grateful to have made it to.
They were grateful to get picked to go.
Whereas the young people, this is the only world they know. And as is the nature of young people, as we would hope that the nature of young people is, it is to kick against.
Yes, it should be. It's very important. Very important. Because wherever we are, whatever world we're in, it's our world, it doesn't matter what age you are. It's that important to question and to challenge and to, can you make it better? For other people as well as yourself.
Fantastic. Well, look, I'm just going to see what we've got on the YouTube chat here in the way of questions. Oh, we've got lots of nice comments. Oh, you're brilliant, Charlie.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. people are saying hello. Hello, Danielle. Hello, Siobhan. Oh, you can read the comments later. Some lovely messages to you. Okay. Poppy Nwosu asks, I have a question. I really love the descriptions and wondered if it was difficult to build that world describing from your head rather than from the real world, as opposed to your first book. Was it harder?
Oh, good question again. I think it was almost easier because you didn't, like, no one, I think that's the joy, and that's probably the fun thing about like fantasy, is that you can put a volcano where you like, or you can put a bison where you like. So it's actually quite good fun to see it in your head and then to think, oh yeah, we need a little something else there and stuff. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Do you have a strong visual imagination?
Probably, yeah, probably, yeah. I'm a big daydreamer, or I kind of, so I quite liked it. It was actually, I think it's easier.
And Siobhan Plaza asks, did you experience any tricky world building issues in the writing, and how did you overcome them?
Yes, I did. I think try really having to be careful not to put anything that was clunky and clunked it back to earth, like back to our present too much. So that was hard. So I did go through quite a few times. There were some references or a few things that were too our contemporary earthbound, and then I had to kind of pull them out and change them, or not have them at all. So I think that's one of the challenges of world building, is going back through to make sure there's nothing that jars. Because you're hoping your reader will go with you and not question too much. So you have to make sure you don't try not to give them. Hopefully, that's a skill I'm working on, to try not to have too many things that, distract you from the world.
Yeah. Do you know what's just occurred to me? When the kids have a day off, they go to an artificial beach. And is there a fun park or something like that?
It's kind of like it's called the Pleasure Dome.
Yes.
Kind of do with it as you will. Yeah.
But there's no suggestion of people reading novels or going to the theatre or Netflix. I'm not going.
No, I know.
So there's no kind of artistic culture that's
actually, there isn't very much, is there?
No,
not really. The only imaginative kind of outlet they have is when they go to their can do their virtual reality. That's their kind of like their only kind of creative.
Or wearing their costumes when they seems like a real breakout moment.
Yeah.
Oh, go wild.
I don't know whether I didn't do it on purpose. I don't know whether that's maybe a reflective of like a heavy kind of government dystopian world.
Yep.
You take away you take away those things.
But if you've got artists, you've got people asking questions.
Yeah. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
This is a very cheeky question from Brent McDibble.
Oh, I love it.
I don't know if I want to go here, but anyway, I will. Is the planet named after J.K. Rowling's alter ego, Robert Galbraith? And what is it with you, Poms and Galbraith?
That's so funny. It isn't. And I was so depressed, because then when I found out that she's called that, I was like, oh no, do I have to change it? But I thought, oh no, it's okay.
There was a Robert Galbraith, and people are very kind of suspicious about, like, it was Robert Galbraith, somebody who was a proponent of conversion therapy for gay people and so on.
Really? Oh my God.
So it's a name with a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
It's a good name for a nasty government, I think.
Yeah, well, that's true. So I was like, okay. She's all over everything.
Now, Waze asked a question. What did you learn from writing your first book that you applied to writing this one? How to get a publisher.
How to get a publisher? How do you navigate that a bit better? Like that's actually like a real thing. I think when you're like a new author, the first book is such a whirlwind, and you really don't know what to expect or anything actually. And so this time I did feel a bit more settled in that sense. and I did feel more prepared to do lots of drafts.
Yep.
You realise that there's a lot of back work that you have to do. So I was like, yeah, okay, I've got to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of learned a bit more to enjoy it a bit more, and to enjoy my own sort of style, really.
Oh,
yeah.
Bit more confident, maybe.
Maybe a little bit more confident. Maybe a little bit more confident with the characters, or taking a bit more liberty with kind of the phrasing and the those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I never used an exclamation mark and a question mark together like before, but now I'm like all over it, so I love that.
And you can put a bison wherever you like. Poppy has said that she loves that. That's a great quote. So
yeah, cool.
I think we can all take that away with us. We can.
Yeah, we can. We're going both bison. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's really our hour. So
I'm
not seeing any other questions, but so just before we wrap up and officially welcome Indigo Owl into the world, we would just remind people that you can purchase the book directly from Wakefield Press online. So just
Wakefield Press, all other independent bookshops.
Do you have favourites?
Yeah, I do. Big shout out to Adelaide, to Shakespeare's Bookshop, to Matilda's, to Dylan's, to all of the great bookshops in Adelaide region, and to all good bookshops and independent bookshops everywhere.
Yeah.
They do such support, for writers writing from smaller publishers. So thank you so much.
100%.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you, Wakefield Press, for supporting New Voices. And the lifeblood really of publishing in this country is those small presses. Obviously, the big companies have their place and they do wonderful work, but it's the smaller presses who sometimes take a chance that really keep things lively and interesting, and also really encouraging own voices and diverse voices into the writing community as well.
They do such an amazing job, and I suppose because it is a bit of a launch, I just really like to thank everybody at Wakefield, and Margot Lloyd and Jo Case in particular, for all their beautiful work in helping me wrestle what's quite a big book and helping me to pull it all together. So thank you so much. And Judith, thank you so much for hosting today. And to Way and all the crowd, Lovers YA and Authors Online. You're amazing.
I haven't had a chance to do this for a few years now.
Great.
It's lovely to have a really in-depth conversation with someone. So thanks to Authors Online. Yeah. Don't forget to check out the other videos. There have been lots of events this year, and once again, as always, the children's and YA writing community has really banded together this year.
It's so amazing. Like, everyone is so supportive of one another. It's just beautiful. It's just lovely.
Yeah, and also supportive of our young readers, kids in schools, the resources that have been produced to support kids learning from home, to support teachers, to support kids in the current climate has just been phenomenal. So big shout out to everyone for stepping up. So congratulations, Charlie, and I am proud to say Indigo Owl is launched.
Yay! Thank you very much. Thank you so much. That's
all right. So lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too as well. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.